Welcome to AI Governance for High-Risk Industries. Advisor Guide, a practical guide to governing AI where decisions have consequences. I'm Michal Harsi, and throughout this audiobook, I invite you to explore a question that is becoming increasingly important for every organization embracing artificial intelligence. Much of today's conversation about AI focuses on making systems more intelligent, more capable, and more autonomous. Yet intelligence alone has never guaranteed trust, accountability, or safety. As artificial intelligence becomes embedded in healthcare, finance, government, manufacturing, critical infrastructure, and other high-risk industries, the consequences of every decision become more significant than ever before. This guide is not about building better AI models. It is about building organizations that remain governable, regardless of how intelligent AI becomes. Over the coming chapters, we'll explore why governance must be treated as operational infrastructure rather than documentation, why authority should always precede intelligence, and why every AI-assisted action should be constitutionally authorized before it is executed. You'll discover practical governance principles, architectural patterns, real-world examples, implementation guidance, and a new way of thinking about trust in the age of intelligent systems. Whether you are a board member, executive, regulator, enterprise architect, governance professional, AI practitioner, or advisor, this audiobook is designed to help you understand not simply how AI works, but how AI should be governed when the consequences of failure are unacceptable. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Introduction. The Governance Challenge. Artificial intelligence has become one of the most transformative technologies of our time. Every day, organizations adopt new AI capabilities to automate decisions, improve efficiency, accelerate innovation, and create new opportunities. Across nearly every industry, AI is moving from experimentation into the heart of operational decision-making. For many organizations, the first question has traditionally been whether artificial intelligence can perform a task better than a human. Today, a more important question is emerging. Can the organization prove that every AI-assisted decision remained within its constitutional authority? This distinction changes the entire conversation. For decades, organizations have successfully governed conventional software because conventional software behaves predictably. When given the same inputs, deterministic software produces the same outputs. Governance frameworks, compliance procedures, audits, and operational controls evolved around this predictable behavior. Modern artificial intelligence behaves differently. Large language models, machine learning systems, and autonomous agents produce outputs that may vary from one interaction to the next. Their reasoning may not always be transparent. Their recommendations may evolve as models are updated or as new information becomes available. This flexibility creates tremendous opportunity, but it also introduces a level of uncertainty that traditional governance mechanisms were never designed to manage. Many organizations attempt to bridge this uncertainty using policies, compliance documentation, approval committees, monitoring dashboards, and human oversight. While these practices remain important, they share a common limitation. They govern people and processes, but they rarely govern the moment when an AI recommendation becomes an operational action. This creates what I refer to as the execution gap. The execution gap is the distance between documented governance and actual operational behavior. An organization may have excellent policies describing what AI should and should not do, yet still lack any mechanism that prevents an AI system from proposing or executing actions outside its intended authority. In high-risk industries, this gap is not simply an operational inconvenience. It represents a governance risk with legal, financial, ethical, and societal consequences. Throughout this audiobook, we will examine how organizations can close that gap by treating governance not as documentation, but as architecture. Rather than asking whether AI is intelligent enough, we will explore whether organizational authority has been designed into the system itself. Because ultimately, trustworthy AI is not created by intelligence alone. It is created by governance. Chapter 2. The AI Revolution and the New Governance Challenge. Artificial intelligence is no longer an emerging technology waiting for widespread adoption. It has become an operational reality. Every day, organizations rely on AI to analyze information, support decisions, automate processes, detect anomalies, generate content, and optimize operations. In many industries, AI is already influencing decisions that affect people's finances, health, safety, employment, and access to essential services. This rapid adoption has brought remarkable opportunities. Organizations can process information faster than ever before, discover patterns hidden within enormous volumes of data, and automate tasks that once required significant human effort. AI promises greater efficiency, improved productivity, and entirely new ways of solving complex problems. Yet every technological revolution introduces a new responsibility. As organizations place greater trust in intelligent systems, they must also ask whether those systems remain under organizational control. Intelligence without governance creates uncertainty. In high-risk environments, uncertainty is not merely inconvenient, it can become unacceptable. Industries such as financial services, healthcare, government, defense, critical infrastructure, energy, transportation, aviation, manufacturing, telecommunications, and public safety operate under very different conditions from consumer applications. Their decisions carry legal obligations, regulatory oversight, ethical responsibilities, and, in many cases, consequences that directly affect human lives. When an AI-powered recommendation influences a medical diagnosis, authorizes a financial transaction, controls industrial equipment, or assists government decision-making, the organization cannot simply hope the recommendation is correct. It must be able to demonstrate that the recommendation was permitted in the first place. This distinction represents one of the most significant shifts in modern governance thinking. For decades, governance focused primarily on software that behaved predictably. Traditional systems followed deterministic rules. Given the same information, they produced the same outcome every time. Governance therefore concentrated on documenting requirements, defining policies, reviewing procedures, and auditing compliance after implementation. Artificial intelligence changes that assumption. Modern AI systems are probabilistic by nature. Their outputs may vary even when presented with similar inputs. Large language models generate responses rather than execute fixed logic. Machine learning systems evolve as they learn from data. Autonomous agents may plan actions dynamically based on changing conditions. This flexibility is precisely what makes AI valuable. It is also what makes governing AI fundamentally different from governing traditional software. Many organizations attempt to manage this challenge using familiar governance mechanisms. They create AI policies, establish oversight committees, perform compliance reviews, require human approval for important decisions, and deploy monitoring systems that observe AI behavior after deployment. These activities are important, but they share a common limitation. None of them directly governs execution. They describe how AI should behave, but they do not necessarily determine whether a particular AI-assisted action is constitutionally authorized before it occurs. This creates what can be described as the execution gap. The execution gap exists whenever governance intentions remain separate from operational execution. Policies may prohibit certain actions, yet the system itself may still allow those actions to occur. Compliance documents may define authority, while runtime systems lack any mechanism to verify that authority before execution. In practice, organizations often discover this gap only after an incident has occurred. A financial institution may discover that an AI system approved transactions outside approved limits. A healthcare provider may discover that clinical recommendations relied on outdated medical guidance. A manufacturer may learn that automated quality systems overlooked critical defects. A government agency may realize that AI recommendations violated constitutional or regulatory requirements. In every case, governance documentation existed. What was missing was governance at the moment of execution. This realization changes the purpose of AI governance. The objective is no longer simply to explain why an AI system produced a recommendation. The objective is to ensure that every recommendation passes through explicit organizational authority before it becomes an action. This is the difference between observing intelligence and governing it. Throughout this guide, governance is treated as an operational capability rather than an administrative exercise. Instead of relying solely on human review or post-incident audits, governance becomes part of the architecture itself. Authority is expressed explicitly. policies become executable. Every decision is evaluated before execution, and evidence is generated automatically as a natural consequence of system operation. This architectural approach transforms governance from a reactive activity into a preventive one. Instead of asking why something went wrong after the fact, organizations design systems in which unauthorized actions cannot occur in the first place. That is particularly important in high-risk industries, where a single unauthorized decision may have legal, financial, operational, or societal consequences. The future of trustworthy AI will not be determined solely by larger models, faster processors, or more sophisticated algorithms. It will be determined by whether organizations can preserve accountability while intelligence continues to evolve. Because in the end, intelligence may recommend. But governance must always determine what is allowed to happen. Chapter 3. Why high-risk industries require a different approach. Not every application of artificial intelligence carries the same level of consequence. If an AI system recommends a movie you don't enjoy, the impact is insignificant. If it suggests the wrong product while shopping online, the inconvenience is usually temporary. Consumer applications can often tolerate occasional mistakes because the cost of failure is relatively low. High-risk industries operate in a completely different reality. In these environments, every decision has consequences that extend far beyond efficiency or convenience. Decisions can affect patient safety, financial stability, national security, public trust, regulatory compliance, environmental protection, and even human life. Here, the tolerance for uncertainty is dramatically lower. Consider a financial institution where artificial intelligence assists with approving loans or monitoring market activity. An unauthorized decision may violate regulations, expose the organization to fraud, or create systemic financial risk. The consequences extend beyond a single customer. They may affect investors, regulators, and the stability of entire markets. Now consider healthcare. Physicians increasingly rely on AI to assist with diagnosis, treatment planning, and medical imaging. These systems can significantly improve clinical outcomes, but they also introduce new responsibilities. An incorrect recommendation, outdated medical knowledge, or an unauthorized treatment suggestion is not simply a technical error. It has the potential to directly affect a patient's health or survival. The same principle applies to government agencies, where AI may support decisions involving public services, immigration, taxation, or law enforcement. Public institutions operate under constitutional authority, meaning every decision must comply with legal obligations, public accountability, and democratic principles. Citizens must be confident not only that decisions are accurate, but that they were lawfully authorized. Defense organizations face an even higher standard. Intelligence systems may assist commanders by analyzing threats, evaluating operational scenarios, or identifying potential targets. Yet no matter how capable the technology becomes, responsibility for the use of force cannot be delegated to probability alone. Every action must remain subject to explicit human authority, legal frameworks, and strategic objectives. Critical infrastructure presents another example. Power grids, water treatment facilities, transportation systems, telecommunications networks, and industrial control systems increasingly depend on intelligent automation. A failure in these environments can disrupt entire communities, damage economies, or place lives at risk. Governance must therefore ensure that every automated action remains within carefully defined operational boundaries. Although these industries differ in purpose, they share one fundamental characteristic. Failure is expensive. Sometimes the cost is measured in financial losses. Sometimes it is measured in legal liability or regulatory sanctions. Sometimes it is measured in damaged reputation or lost public confidence. In the most severe cases, it is measured in injuries or lives. Because the consequences are so significant, governance cannot simply exist as documentation stored in policy manuals or compliance reports. Governance must become part of the operational system itself. Many organizations assume that compliance alone is sufficient. They produce policies, conduct audits, document procedures, and demonstrate adherence to regulatory frameworks. These activities are essential, but they answer only part of the problem. Compliance tells us what an organization intends to do. Governance determines what the system is actually permitted to do. This distinction becomes especially important when artificial intelligence participates in operational decision-making. A policy may state that certain actions require executive approval, that patient safety must always take priority, or that financial transactions above a specified threshold require additional authorization. However, unless those requirements are enforced during execution, they remain intentions rather than operational guarantees. In high-risk environments, governance must function continuously. Every proposed action must be evaluated before execution. Authority must be verified. Constraints must be enforced automatically. If authority cannot be established, execution must not proceed. This is not about slowing innovation, it is about making innovation trustworthy. Organizations often believe that stronger monitoring or more sophisticated explainability tools will solve the governance problem. While these capabilities provide valuable insight, they generally operate after decisions have already been made. They explain what happened rather than preventing what should never have happened. True governance works differently. Instead of reacting to failures, it prevents unauthorized actions from occurring. Instead of depending solely on human oversight, it embeds authority directly into operational architecture. Instead of reconstructing evidence after an incident, it generates verifiable evidence automatically as decisions are made. This approach transforms governance from a compliance exercise into an operational capability. Ultimately, every organization operating in a high-risk environment must answer a simple but profound question. If artificial intelligence became unavailable tomorrow, would the organization still be able to operate safely, lawfully, and effectively? If the answer is no, then governance has become dependent on intelligence rather than independent of it. The organizations that will succeed in the age of artificial intelligence are not those that build the most intelligent systems. They will be the organizations that ensure intelligence always operates within constitutional authority, that every decision is governed before it is executed, and that trust is established through architecture rather than assumption. That is the standard required for high-risk industries, and it is the foundation upon which the remainder of this guide is built. Chapter 4. Governance must exist before intelligence. One of the greatest misconceptions surrounding artificial intelligence is the belief that governance should supervise AI after it has already made a decision. At first glance, this approach appears reasonable. An AI system generates a recommendation, a human reviews it. Compliance teams monitor activity, and auditors examine the results later. On paper, the organization appears to have governance in place. But there is a fundamental problem with this model. If governance begins only after intelligence has acted, then governance is no longer directing the system. It is simply reacting to it. In high-risk industries, that distinction matters. Imagine constructing a building and deciding to install the foundations only after the structure has been completed. It would be impossible because the foundation is not something added afterward. It is the element that supports everything built upon it. Governance functions in exactly the same way. It cannot be treated as a supervisory layer that sits above intelligence. It must become the foundation upon which intelligence operates. This shift in thinking represents one of the most important concepts in constitutional AI governance. Rather than asking how we can control increasingly intelligent systems after they have made recommendations, we begin by asking a different question. What is this organization constitutionally permitted to do? Only after that question has been answered should intelligence be allowed to participate. In other words, governance defines the boundaries before intelligence begins reasoning within them. Think about how organizations operate today. Every organization has a purpose. It has legal obligations, internal policies, delegated authority, operational procedures, ethical standards, and regulatory requirements. Long before an employee performs a task, the organization has already determined who may perform it, under what conditions and within which limitations. Artificial intelligence should operate no differently. Instead of allowing an AI system to generate unrestricted actions and then attempting to filter the results afterward, governance establishes the permissible space in advance. Intelligence becomes free to innovate, optimize, and recommend solutions, but only within constitutional boundaries that have already been defined. This changes the relationship between governance and AI. Governance is no longer a supervisor. It becomes the operating environment. Within that environment, intelligence can contribute enormous value. Outside it, intelligence has no authority. That distinction is critical because intelligence and authority are fundamentally different concepts. Artificial intelligence can recognize patterns, analyze enormous quantities of information, generate recommendations, and predict likely outcomes. These capabilities continue to improve with every generation of models. But intelligence does not create authority. Authority originates from the organization itself. Only an organization can determine its mission, legal responsibilities, ethical obligations, risk appetite, and constitutional principles. These cannot be learned statistically or inferred from historical data. They must be defined explicitly. When organizations confuse intelligence with authority, they create dangerous assumptions. A highly capable AI model may recommend approving a financial transaction because it predicts a favorable outcome. It may recommend a medical treatment because statistical evidence suggests success. It may recommend a manufacturing adjustment because efficiency appears to improve. None of these recommendations automatically become authorized simply because they are intelligent. Authorization remains an organizational decision. This is why constitutional AI governance separates intelligence from execution. Intelligence proposes, governance decides. Only after governance confirms that an action complies with organizational authority should execution be allowed to proceed. This principle fundamentally changes system architecture. Traditional AI systems often begin with a model that generates outputs. Governance mechanisms are then layered around the model to monitor behavior, explain results, or intervene when necessary. Constitutional architectures reverse that sequence. The first question is not, what does the AI recommend? The first question is, what actions are constitutionally permissible? Once those boundaries are established, intelligence operates entirely within them. This architectural inversion provides several important advantages. Organizations gain predictable control over operational behavior, regardless of which AI model is deployed. Governance remains stable even as technology evolves. New models can be introduced, existing models can be replaced, and emerging capabilities can be adopted without redefining organizational authority. The governance architecture remains constant while intelligence continues to evolve. Perhaps most importantly, this approach enables what I describe as structural refusal. Structural refusal means that when governance cannot establish authority for a proposed action, the system does not attempt to negotiate, explain, or justify the decision. It simply refuses to execute. This refusal is not the result of uncertainty or technical failure. It is evidence that governance is functioning correctly. Just as an aircraft's safety systems prevent dangerous operations regardless of pilot intent, constitutional governance prevents unauthorized actions regardless of the intelligence that proposed them. In this way, refusal becomes a feature rather than a limitation. It protects the organization by making certain categories of failure structurally impossible. As artificial intelligence continues to evolve, models will become faster, more capable, and increasingly autonomous. They will process larger volumes of information, generate more sophisticated recommendations, and operate in environments of growing complexity. But none of these advances change a fundamental truth. Organizations are not governed by intelligence, they are governed by authority. The future of trustworthy AI will therefore belong to organizations that establish governance first, define authority explicitly, and allow intelligence to operate only within those constitutional boundaries. Because when governance becomes the foundation instead of the supervisor, intelligence becomes not only more powerful, but also more trustworthy, more accountable, and ultimately, more valuable. Chapter 5. The Principles of Constitutional AI Governance. Every enduring system is built upon principles. Nations are guided by constitutions. Organizations are guided by missions, values, and policies. Engineering disciplines rely on laws of physics that do not change with fashion or technology. In the same way, trustworthy artificial intelligence requires principles that remain stable regardless of how rapidly AI evolves. Technologies will continue to change. Models will become more capable, faster, and increasingly autonomous. Regulations will evolve. New business opportunities will emerge. Yet beneath all of these changes, governance must remain constant. That stability begins with a constitutional approach. Constitutional AI governance is not a collection of software features or compliance checklists. It is a way of designing organizations so that intelligence always operates within clearly defined authority. Rather than relying on trust in a particular AI model, constitutional governance establishes architectural rules that remain valid regardless of the intelligence technology being used. The first principle is that organizational purpose must remain an invariant. Every organization exists for a reason. It has a mission, strategic objectives, legal responsibilities, and commitments to its stakeholders. These define why the organization exists and what it is trying to achieve. Artificial intelligence should never redefine that purpose. Instead, AI should serve it. As organizations adopt new technologies, replace existing models, or automate additional processes, their constitutional purpose must remain unchanged. Governance exists to ensure that every intelligent capability continues to advance the organization's mission rather than gradually drifting away from it. This introduces an important concept known as semantic drift. Semantic drift occurs when systems slowly begin interpreting organizational objectives differently from their original intent. The change may be subtle, almost invisible at first, but over time it can fundamentally alter how decisions are made. Constitutional governance prevents this drift by continually aligning intelligence with organizational purpose. The second principle is that authority must always be explicit. Authority cannot be guessed. It cannot be inferred from historical patterns, statistical probabilities, or previous behavior. Authority must be intentionally defined by the organization itself. An AI system may observe that certain decisions have historically been approved under particular circumstances. That observation does not grant permission to repeat those decisions in the future. Only the organization has the authority to define who may act, under which conditions, and within what limits. This distinction separates intelligent recommendation from legitimate authorization. No matter how accurate a prediction may appear, intelligence does not create permission. Authority always precedes execution. The third principle is that governance must be executable. Many organizations have excellent governance documents. Policies are carefully written. Compliance procedures are well documented. Standards are reviewed regularly. Unfortunately, documents do not execute. At the precise moment an AI-assisted action occurs, a written policy cannot prevent an unauthorized decision. It cannot validate authority. It cannot refuse execution. Only executable governance can perform those functions. Executable governance transforms organizational policy into operational behavior. Governance becomes part of the runtime architecture, continuously evaluating every proposed action before execution takes place. Instead of existing in binders, presentations, or regulatory reports, governance becomes active infrastructure. This shift is essential because organizations are ultimately governed by what their systems actually do, not by what their documentation says they should do. The fourth principle recognizes that evidence must emerge naturally from execution. Many organizations spend enormous effort reconstructing events after something has gone wrong. They collect logs, interview employees, analyze reports, and attempt to understand how decisions were made. This reactive approach is slow, expensive, and often incomplete. Constitutional governance takes a different path. Evidence should not be reconstructed. It should be created automatically as every governance decision occurs. Every authorization, every refusal, every validation, and every execution becomes part of an immutable operational history. Evidence is no longer an administrative burden performed after deployment. It becomes a natural byproduct of normal system operation. This capability transforms audits, investigations, regulatory reviews, and organizational accountability because the evidence already exists the moment an action is completed. The fifth principle may seem surprising. Intelligence should remain optional. At first, this appears contradictory. Organizations invest heavily in AI because they expect it to become an essential capability. Yet constitutional governance asks a different question. What happens when intelligence becomes unavailable? Models may fail, services may become unreachable, providers may discontinue products, cyber attacks may disrupt operations, regulators may temporarily suspend certain AI systems. Technical failures are inevitable in any complex environment. If an organization cannot continue operating safely without AI, then intelligence has become a single point of governance failure. That dependency introduces unnecessary risk. A resilient organization ensures that governance survives even when intelligence does not. Deterministic rules, manual procedures, and alternative operational methods must always remain available for critical functions. AI should enhance organizational capability. It should never become the foundation upon which governance depends. The final principle is structural refusal. This is perhaps the most distinctive characteristic of constitutional governance. Traditional systems often assume that every request deserves an answer and every recommendation deserves consideration. Constitutional systems operate differently. If authority cannot be established, execution simply does not occur. There is no negotiation, no approximation, no statistical confidence threshold, no attempt to compensate for missing authority through increased probability. The action is refused. This refusal is not a technical limitation. It is an intentional, architectural safeguard. Just as a secure vault cannot be opened without the proper credentials, a constitutional system cannot execute actions that lack explicit organizational authority. Structural refusal transforms governance from passive observation into active protection. Instead of detecting violations after damage has occurred, it prevents unauthorized actions from becoming possible in the first place. Taken together, these 6 principles form a constitutional foundation for governing artificial intelligence. Purpose provides direction. Authority establishes legitimacy. Executable governance enforces organizational intent. Native evidence creates accountability. Optional intelligence preserves resilience. Structural refusal protects organizational integrity. None of these principles depends upon a specific vendor, model, programming language, or regulatory framework. They represent architectural truths that remain applicable regardless of future technological advances. Artificial intelligence will continue to evolve at extraordinary speed. These principles are designed so that governance does not have to. Because while intelligence may constantly change, trust must remain constant. And trust is not created by increasingly intelligent machines. It is created by governance that remains stable, explicit, executable, and constitutional, no matter how intelligent those machines become. Chapter 6. The 5 layers of governance. Every complex system relies on layers. Modern buildings have structural foundations, electrical systems, plumbing, communications, and safety mechanisms. Aircraft rely on multiple independent systems working together to ensure safe flight. Financial institutions separate identity, authorization, transaction processing, and auditing into distinct but connected components. Artificial intelligence governance requires the same architectural discipline. No single control can provide complete governance. Policies alone are insufficient. Human oversight alone is insufficient. Monitoring alone is insufficient. Even the most advanced AI model cannot govern itself. Effective governance emerges from multiple layers working together, each performing a specific responsibility, while reinforcing the integrity of the entire system. Together, these layers transform governance from an administrative function into operational infrastructure. The first layer is deterministic authority. Everything begins with authority. Before an organization asks what artificial intelligence should do, it must first establish what the organization itself permits. Authority defines who may perform an action, under which conditions and within what boundaries. Unlike artificial intelligence, authority is never probabilistic. It does not estimate. It does not predict. It does not infer permission from historical behavior. Authority is explicit. It originates from organizational policy, legal obligations, delegated responsibility, contractual agreements, and constitutional principles. Every AI-assisted action must ultimately derive its legitimacy from this foundation. When deterministic authority exists, there is no ambiguity about what is permitted. Intelligence operates within clearly defined limits, rather than attempting to discover those limits through experience. The second layer is canonical knowledge. Organizations depend on information. But information alone is not enough. Different departments often maintain different versions of the same data. Procedures evolve. Regulations change. Policies are updated. Without a single authoritative source of truth, intelligent systems may produce inconsistent recommendations simply because they rely on inconsistent knowledge. Canonical knowledge solves this problem. It establishes one authoritative representation of organizational truth. Every governance decision references the same approved policies, regulations, definitions, operational procedures, and business concepts. Instead of allowing each AI system to interpret information independently, the organization ensures that every intelligent capability works from the same constitutional understanding of reality. This consistency becomes especially important in high-risk industries where conflicting information may produce conflicting decisions. Governance cannot remain consistent if organizational knowledge itself is inconsistent. The third layer is semantic governance. Many systems evaluate information by comparing keywords or statistical similarity. Human organizations operate differently. Meaning matters. Words derive significance from context, organizational purpose, legal interpretation, professional standards, and operational intent. Two statements may contain similar language while conveying entirely different meanings. Semantic governance preserves organizational meaning throughout decision-making. Instead of asking whether information appears similar, semantic governance asks whether it remains coherent with constitutional intent. Does this recommendation preserve organizational purpose? Does it align with authoritative knowledge? Has meaning drifted from what the organization actually intended? These questions move governance beyond simple rule enforcement. They protect the integrity of organizational understanding itself. As artificial intelligence becomes increasingly capable of generating language, recommendations, and complex reasoning, preserving semantic integrity becomes just as important as preserving technical accuracy. An organization can possess technically correct information while still violating its constitutional intent. Semantic governance prevents that outcome. The fourth layer is execution governance. This is where governance becomes operational. Until this point, authority has been defined, knowledge has been established, and meaning has been preserved. Now the organization must decide whether a proposed action may actually occur. Execution governance evaluates every proposed action immediately before execution. This timing is critical. Most organizations review decisions after they have already happened. Auditors investigate incidents. Compliance teams examine reports. Monitoring systems generate alerts. Execution governance operates differently. It evaluates actions before they become reality. Before an AI recommendation becomes an operational decision, governance confirms that authority exists, policies are satisfied, risks remain acceptable, required approvals are present, and constitutional boundaries have not been violated. Only then does execution proceed. If any requirement cannot be verified, the system refuses execution. This transforms governance from observation into prevention. Instead of documenting failures, it prevents unauthorized actions from occurring. The final layer is immutable evidence. Every governance decision leaves behind evidence. Traditionally, organizations attempt to reconstruct that evidence after an event has occurred. Investigators gather logs, analyze reports, interview personnel, and attempt to understand what happened. Constitutional governance eliminates this reconstruction process. Evidence is created automatically as every governance decision occurs. Each authorization, refusal, validation, approval, override, and execution contributes to an immutable operational record. Because this evidence is generated as part of normal execution, rather than as a separate administrative activity, it becomes more complete, more trustworthy, and significantly easier to verify. Auditors no longer depend solely on human recollection or fragmented system logs. Regulators can independently verify organizational behavior. Executives gain confidence that governance decisions can always be demonstrated with objective evidence. Perhaps most importantly, immutable evidence creates organizational memory. Every decision contributes to a permanent history of governance that supports continuous improvement, accountability, and institutional trust. Although each governance layer performs a different function, none operates independently. Deterministic authority establishes legitimacy. Canonical knowledge provides consistent organizational truth. Semantic governance preserves meaning. Execution governance authorizes action. Immutable evidence records everything that occurs. Together, they create a governance architecture capable of supporting intelligent systems without surrendering organizational control. Notice that artificial intelligence itself is not one of these layers. That is intentional. The governance architecture exists independently of any specific model or technology. Organizations may replace language models, upgrade machine learning systems, adopt autonomous agents, or introduce technologies that have not yet been invented. The governance architecture remains unchanged. Authority remains constant. Knowledge remains authoritative. Meaning remains coherent. Execution remains governed. Evidence remains immutable. This independence is one of the defining characteristics of constitutional AI governance. Rather than building governance around artificial intelligence, organizations build artificial intelligence inside governance. That single architectural decision changes everything. It transforms governance from an external control into an intrinsic property of the system itself. And when governance becomes architecture rather than oversight, organizations achieve something far more valuable than compliance. They achieve operational trust, because true trust does not emerge from believing that artificial intelligence will always make the right decision. It emerges from knowing that no decision can ever be executed unless the organization itself has first determined that it is constitutionally permitted. Chapter 7. Governance is not explainability. One of the most common misconceptions in artificial intelligence is the belief that if we can explain a decision, then we have governed it. At first, this seems logical. If an AI system can tell us why it made a recommendation, perhaps we can trust it. If we understand its reasoning, perhaps we can determine whether the decision was appropriate. This assumption has led to the rapid growth of explainable artificial intelligence, often referred to as XAI. Explainability has become an important area of AI research because modern machine learning models are often complex and difficult to interpret. Organizations understandably want transparency, executives want confidence, regulators want accountability. Users want to understand why a system produced a particular recommendation. Explainability attempts to answer those questions. It helps us understand how an AI system reached a conclusion, but understanding a decision is not the same as governing it. This distinction is fundamental. Explainability answers the question, why did the AI make this recommendation? Governance asks a completely different question. Should the AI have been allowed to make this recommendation in the first place? These are not the same problem. Imagine a bank where an AI system approves a loan that exceeds the institution's authorized lending limits. After the approval, an explainability tool provides a detailed report. It identifies the applicant's credit history, income, employment record, and repayment probability. The reasoning's technically sound. Every factor influencing the recommendation is clearly documented. The explanation may be excellent. Yet the governance failure remains. If the AI lacked authority to approve a loan of that size, then no explanation can make the decision legitimate. The organization still violated its own constitutional boundaries. The same principle applies in healthcare. An AI diagnostic system may explain that it recommended a particular treatment because historical patient data suggested a high probability of success. The explanation may be medically reasonable. But if the recommendation relied on outdated clinical guidance, violated hospital policy, or exceeded the AI's delegated authority, then the explanation changes nothing. Understanding why an unauthorized action occurred does not authorize the action. Governance exists to prevent unauthorized execution before it happens. Explainability only describes events after they have already occurred. This difference reveals another important limitation. Explainability is inherently retrospective. It looks backward. It reconstructs reasoning after execution. Governance operates prospectively. It looks forward. It determines whether execution should occur at all. The distinction may appear subtle, but architecturally it changes everything. Organizations that rely exclusively on explainability often develop a false sense of security. Detailed explanations create confidence that systems are operating responsibly because decisions appear understandable. Yet understandable decisions can still violate organizational authority. Transparent systems can still perform unauthorized actions. Interpretable recommendations can still produce catastrophic consequences. Trust cannot be built solely upon explanation. Trust must be established before execution begins. Another misconception is that explainability creates accountability. In reality, explainability identifies reasoning. Governance identifies responsibility. Artificial intelligence cannot accept legal responsibility for its actions. It cannot appear before regulators. It cannot sign compliance documents. It cannot accept liability. Only organizations possess authority and accountability. Governance ensures that every AI-assisted action remains connected to explicit organizational responsibility. This is why constitutional AI governance separates intelligence from authority. Artificial intelligence contributes recommendations. Governance determines whether those recommendations become operational decisions. Responsibility always remains with the organization. This does not mean explainability lacks value. On the contrary, explainability remains an important capability. It helps engineers improve models. It assists auditors investigating complex decisions. It provides transparency for regulators. It increases confidence among users and stakeholders. It supports education, debugging, validation, and continuous improvement. But explainability should always operate within governance rather than replacing it. Think of explainability as a diagnostic instrument inside a well-governed system. It provides insight. It does not provide permission. The architectural sequence therefore becomes critically important. First, governance establishes constitutional boundaries. Second, authority determines what actions are permissible. Third, execution governance validates every proposed action before execution. Only after these conditions have been satisfied does explainability become valuable for understanding why an authorized decision occurred. In other words, governance determines whether an action may happen. Explainability helps us understand how it happened. One cannot replace the other. As artificial intelligence continues to evolve, explainability techniques will undoubtedly improve. Models will become more transparent, new visualization methods will emerge, better reasoning traces and decision summaries will become available. These advances are valuable. But no amount of transparency can substitute for constitutional authority. An organization should never rely on explanations to justify decisions that should never have been executed. Instead, governance should make unauthorized actions structurally impossible. That is the true purpose of constitutional architecture. When governance comes first, explanations become more meaningful because they describe decisions that were already known to be legitimate. Without governance, explanations risk becoming little more than detailed descriptions of organizational failure. The future of trustworthy artificial intelligence will therefore not be built upon systems that merely explain themselves. It will be built upon systems that first determine whether an action is constitutionally permitted, and only then explain how that authorized decision was reached. Because organizations do not earn trust simply by explaining what happened. They earn trust by ensuring that only authorized actions can ever happen in the first place. Chapter 9. Governing AI at the moment of decision. There is a simple truth that every organization eventually discovers. The most important moment in governance is not when a policy is written. It is not when an audit is performed. It is not when a regulator reviews compliance. The most important moment is the instant a decision becomes an action. That single moment determines whether governance succeeds or fails. Until a recommendation is executed, it remains only a possibility. Once execution begins, however, the consequences become real. Money is transferred. A patient receives treatment. Access is granted. A production line changes course. A legal decision is enforced. After that point, governance can explain what happened. It can investigate what happened. It can report what happened. But it can no longer prevent what happened. This is why constitutional AI governance places such importance on governing the precise moment of execution. The execution point is where organizational authority meets artificial intelligence. It is where recommendations become decisions. It is where possibility becomes reality. And it is where governance must be strongest. Traditional AI architectures often treat execution as a simple technical process. An AI model produces an answer. The application receives the answer. The answer is executed. Governance, if it exists at all, usually surrounds this workflow rather than controlling it. Logs are created, alerts are generated, dashboards display metrics, auditors examine historical records. All of these activities are valuable. None of them determines whether the action should occur. Constitutional governance introduces a fundamentally different sequence. Before execution, the proposed action is intercepted, not to evaluate how intelligent it appears, not to determine whether the probability is sufficiently high, but to answer a much more important question. Does this organisation possess the constitutional authority to perform this action right now? Only after that question has been answered does execution continue. This may sound like a small architectural adjustment. In reality, it changes the entire relationship between artificial intelligence and organisational control. Instead of intelligence driving execution, governance becomes the gateway through which every action must pass. Nothing bypasses it. Nothing is assumed. Nothing is implicitly trusted. Every action is evaluated independently according to the organisation's constitutional rules. This creates what can be thought of as a governance checkpoint. Just as secure facilities verify identity before granting physical access, constitutional systems verify authority before granting operational access. The checkpoint exists for every decision. Regardless of whether the recommendation originated from an AI model, a software application, an automated workflow, or even a human operator, the same constitutional evaluation occurs. Governance applies consistently because governance is independent of the source of the decision. This consistency is essential. Organizations often focus on making AI more accurate. Accuracy is important, but accuracy alone cannot determine legitimacy. An AI recommendation may be perfectly accurate while still violating organizational policy. A prediction may be statistically correct while exceeding delegated authority. A recommendation may maximize efficiency while introducing unacceptable legal or ethical risk. Execution governance evaluates all of these considerations simultaneously. It asks whether the action is lawful, whether it is authorized, whether required approvals are present, whether mandatory constraints have been satisfied, whether the proposed execution remains consistent with organizational purpose. Only if the answer to every constitutional requirement is affirmative does execution proceed. Otherwise, the system refuses. Notice that this refusal does not mean the recommendation was unintelligent. It simply means the organization has determined that intelligence alone is insufficient. Authority is required. This distinction protects organizations from one of the greatest risks associated with increasingly capable AI systems. As artificial intelligence improves, people naturally become more willing to trust its recommendations. Confidence grows, automation expands, human review gradually decreases. Without strong execution governance, organizations may unknowingly allow statistical confidence to replace constitutional authority. That substitution is dangerous. Probability can estimate outcomes. Authority determines permission. The two are not interchangeable. Execution governance ensures they never become confused. Another important characteristic of execution governance is context. The same recommendation may be acceptable in one situation and prohibited in another. Consider a hospital. An AI system may recommend an emergency intervention that is entirely appropriate during a life-threatening crisis. The identical recommendation might require additional approvals during routine clinical care. The recommendation itself has not changed, the context has. Governance evaluates not only what is being proposed, but also when, where, by whom, under which authority, and for what purpose. Execution decisions therefore become contextual rather than purely computational. This is precisely how human organizations have always operated. Rules are interpreted within context. Authority depends upon circumstances. Responsibilities change according to operational conditions. Constitutional governance brings this organizational reality into AI-enabled systems. Another advantage becomes apparent over time. Organizations inevitably evolve. Regulations change. New products are introduced. Departments are reorganized. Authority is delegated differently. Business priorities shift. Without execution governance, every operational system may need to be modified individually whenever governance changes. That approach is expensive, slow, and prone to inconsistency. When governance exists as a constitutional execution layer, organizational changes are implemented once within governance itself, every connected intelligence system immediately operates under the updated constitutional rules. Governance becomes adaptive without sacrificing consistency. This dramatically simplifies organizational evolution while maintaining control. Perhaps the most reassuring aspect of execution governance is that it preserves human accountability. Artificial intelligence may recommend, software may automate, systems may accelerate operational processes, but the authority behind every executed action always remains traceable to the organization itself. No decision occurs because an algorithm desired it. Every decision occurs because organizational governance determined it was permissible. That distinction preserves accountability in a world increasingly shaped by intelligent automation. As AI systems continue to advance toward greater autonomy, the importance of execution governance will only increase. Organizations cannot predict every future capability that artificial intelligence will possess. They cannot anticipate every new model, every reasoning technique, or every emerging application. But they do not need to. If governance remains anchored at the moment of execution, organizations retain control regardless of how intelligent their systems become. Technology evolves, authority endures. And that may be the most important lesson of all. The future of trustworthy artificial intelligence will not be determined by systems that make better decisions. It will be determined by systems that ensure no decision becomes reality until governance has confirmed that it has the constitutional right to exist. Chapter 11. The advisor's role in the age of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is changing more than technology. It is changing leadership. For decades, executives relied on advisors to help navigate financial uncertainty, regulatory change, operational risk, cybersecurity, and corporate strategy. Advisors translated complexity into informed decisions, helping organizations move forward with confidence while avoiding unnecessary risk. Artificial intelligence introduces a new dimension to that responsibility. Today, organizations are not simply deciding whether to adopt AI. In many sectors, that decision has already been made. AI is becoming embedded in business operations, customer interactions, supply chains, healthcare delivery, financial services, manufacturing, and public administration. The question is no longer whether AI will become part of the organization. The question is whether the organization will govern it effectively. This is where advisors become indispensable. Many executives understand the potential of artificial intelligence. They recognize opportunities for automation, efficiency, innovation, and competitive advantage. At the same time, they are aware of increasing regulatory expectations, public scrutiny, cybersecurity concerns, ethical considerations, and operational risks. They often find themselves navigating unfamiliar territory. Artificial intelligence evolves far more quickly than traditional governance frameworks. New models appear every few months. Capabilities that seemed impossible a year ago become commercially available almost overnight. Organizations struggle to determine which technologies deserve investment, which risks require immediate attention, and which governance structures will remain effective as AI continues to evolve. Advisors provide clarity in that uncertainty, but the role of an AI governance advisor extends far beyond explaining technology. An advisor's responsibility is not to recommend the newest model or compare benchmark scores. Those discussions are valuable, but they rarely determine whether an organization will operate safely over the long term. Instead, the advisor helps leadership ask better questions. Does this AI capability align with our organizational purpose? Who is accountable for decisions supported by artificial intelligence? Where does authority originate? How will governance be enforced during execution? Can every operational decision be justified through evidence? What happens if the AI system becomes unavailable? These questions move the conversation away from technology and toward governance. That shift is essential because organizations do not ultimately compete on algorithms. They compete on trust. An advisor therefore becomes an architect of confidence. Executives need someone who can explain that governance is not an obstacle to innovation, but the condition that makes innovation sustainable. Without governance, every technological advance introduces new uncertainty. With governance, organizations gain the confidence to adopt new capabilities while preserving accountability. This perspective changes how AI initiatives are evaluated. Instead of asking whether a particular model is more intelligent, advisors encourage leaders to ask whether the organization is prepared to govern intelligence responsibly. That distinction influences investment decisions, procurement strategies, regulatory compliance, operational resilience, and long-term organizational strategy. Another important responsibility of the advisor is translation. Artificial intelligence is often discussed using technical language that can appear inaccessible to boards of directors and executive teams. Concepts such as neural networks, transformer architectures, embeddings, vector databases, reinforcement learning, and large language models are important for engineers, but they are not the language of corporate governance. Boards speak about accountability, executives speak about strategy, risk committees speak about controls, regulators speak about compliance, shareholders speak about value, customers speak about trust. An effective advisor translates technical capability into governance implications that decision makers can understand and act upon. This ability to bridge technology and governance becomes increasingly valuable as organizations mature. The advisor also serves as an independent perspective. During periods of rapid technological change, organizations can become captivated by innovation. New capabilities generate excitement. Competitors announce ambitious AI initiatives, and market pressure encourages rapid adoption. In such an environment, governance can easily become secondary. A trusted advisor helps leadership resist that temptation, not by discouraging innovation, but by ensuring that enthusiasm never replaces disciplined decision-making. Sometimes the most valuable advice an organization receives is not encouragement to move faster. It is the confidence to pause long enough to build the governance architecture that will allow innovation to succeed safely. Advisors also help organizations recognize that AI governance is not the responsibility of a single department. It is not solely an IT initiative. It does not belong exclusively to compliance, cybersecurity, legal teams, or data science groups. Governance touches every part of the organization because every part of the organization may eventually depend upon intelligent systems. This requires collaboration across executive leadership, operational management, technical teams, legal professionals, risk specialists, and governing boards. The advisor helps create that shared understanding. Perhaps the most significant contribution an advisor can make is helping organizations think beyond immediate implementation. Technology projects often focus on deployment. Governance focuses on longevity. An advisor encourages leaders to consider how today's decisions will affect the organization 5 or 10 years from now. Will the governance architecture still function when new AI models replace now? Will the governance architecture still function when new AI models replace today's systems? Will organizational authority remain clear as automation expands? Will evidence remain available to demonstrate accountability? Will governance adapt without requiring every operational system to be redesigned? These questions are not about today's technology, they are about tomorrow's resilience. In the years ahead, artificial intelligence will continue to evolve in ways that are difficult to predict. New forms of reasoning, autonomous agents, multimodal systems, and capabilities we cannot yet imagine will become part of everyday operations. Organizations that anchor their strategy to a particular technology may find themselves constantly rebuilding. Organizations that anchor their strategy to constitutional governance will find that technology can evolve while governance remains stable. That is why the advisor's greatest value is not technical expertise alone. It is the ability to help organizations build a foundation that outlasts any individual AI model, software platform, or technological trend. Because in the age of artificial intelligence, the most valuable advisor is not the one who can predict the future. It is the one who helps organizations prepare for it by ensuring that whatever intelligence the future brings, governance will already be there to guide it. Chapter 12. A Roadmap for Constitutional AI Governance. Every successful transformation begins with a clear direction. Organizations often believe that adopting artificial intelligence starts with selecting the right technology. They compare models, evaluate vendors, explore cloud platforms, and experiment with new capabilities. While these activities are important, they are not the true beginning of AI transformation. The real beginning is governance. Without governance, technology becomes difficult to control. Every new capability introduces additional uncertainty. Every new automation creates another potential point of risk. Organizations may innovate rapidly, but they also accumulate complexity that becomes increasingly difficult to manage. Constitutional AI governance offers a different path. Rather than asking organizations to govern artificial intelligence after deployment, it encourages them to establish a constitutional foundation before intelligent systems become deeply integrated into operations. The journey begins with understanding the organization itself. Before governance frameworks are designed or technologies are selected, leaders must understand the organization's purpose, responsibilities, and decision-making structure. Every organization already possesses authority. It already has policies, regulations, delegated responsibilities, and operational procedures. These elements form the constitutional foundation that governance must protect. Artificial intelligence should never redefine that foundation. Its role is to operate within it. The next stage is identifying where artificial intelligence participates in operational decisions. Many organizations are surprised to discover how quickly AI has entered their daily activities. Recommendation engines assist employees. Language models draft communications. Intelligent automation processes customer requests. Machine learning systems support risk assessments, fraud detection, diagnostics, forecasting, and planning. Some of these systems provide information. Others directly influence operational decisions. Understanding where intelligence affects execution is essential because governance must exist wherever intelligent recommendations have the potential to become organizational actions. Once these decision points have been identified, organizations can begin mapping authority. Every operational decision should have a clearly identifiable source of authorization. Someone within the organization must ultimately possess responsibility for that decision. Authority may originate from legislation, corporate policy, executive delegation, contractual obligations, professional standards, or regulatory requirements. What matters is not where authority originates, but that it is explicit. Artificial intelligence cannot invent authority. It can only operate within authority that already exists. The next step is transforming governance from documentation into execution. This is often the most significant change organizations experience. Policies remain valuable, but they are no longer viewed as the final destination. Instead, policies become the source from which executable governance is derived. Organizational intent is translated into operational controls that evaluate every proposed action before execution occurs. This transformation requires collaboration. Legal experts contribute regulatory interpretation. Risk professionals identify organizational exposures. Operational leaders define business processes. Technology teams implement governance mechanisms. Executives establish strategic priorities. Governance succeeds because it represents the organization as a whole rather than the objectives of any single department. As governance becomes operational, organizations begin creating constitutional evidence. Every authorization, every validation, every refusal, every exception, every executed decision. Each contributes to an operational history that demonstrates not merely what happened, but why the organization permitted it to happen. Over time, this evidence becomes one of the organization's most valuable strategic assets. It supports regulatory compliance, it strengthens internal accountability, it simplifies auditing, it accelerates investigations. Most importantly, it reinforces trust by making governance visible rather than assumed. As organizations mature, governance evolves alongside them. New regulations appear. Business priorities change. Departments expand. Markets develop. Artificial intelligence becomes more capable. Yet constitutional governance remains remarkably stable because it is anchored in organizational authority rather than technological implementation. Technology evolves around governance rather than governance chasing technology. This distinction allows organizations to innovate with confidence. They can evaluate new AI capabilities without redesigning their governance architecture every time a new model enters the market. Intelligent systems become replaceable components operating inside a stable, constitutional framework. That stability creates long-term resilience. No roadmap is ever perfectly linear. Organizations will encounter unexpected challenges, Some governance controls will require refinement. New operational risks will emerge. Regulatory expectations will continue to evolve. Artificial intelligence itself will continue advancing in ways that are difficult to predict. This is entirely normal. Constitutional governance is not about creating a perfect system. It is about creating a system capable of adapting without losing its constitutional integrity. That may be its greatest strength. Organizations do not need to predict every future technology. They only need a governance architecture capable of evaluating whatever technology the future brings. As the journey continues, leaders often discover that governance changes more than their AI systems. It changes how the organization thinks about responsibility. It changes how decisions are authorized. It changes how accountability is demonstrated. It changes how trust is earned. Eventually, governance ceases to be viewed as a regulatory obligation. It becomes a strategic capability, a competitive advantage, a foundation upon which innovation can safely grow. This is the destination of constitutional AI governance. Not a world where artificial intelligence replaces human responsibility, but a world where intelligence and governance work together, each performing the role it was designed to fulfill. Intelligence expands what organizations are capable of achieving. Governance ensures that those capabilities are exercised responsibly. When these two principles remain in balance, organizations are free to innovate with confidence, adapt to change without losing control, and embrace the future without compromising the values that define who they are. That is the journey this guide has been designed to support, and for every organization preparing to enter the next era of artificial intelligence, it is a journey worth taking. Chapter 13. The Future of AI Governance. Every technological revolution eventually reaches a point where the technology itself is no longer the greatest challenge. The greatest challenge becomes governance. History has demonstrated this repeatedly. The Industrial Revolution transformed manufacturing, but its long-term success depended on standards for safety, quality, and labour. The rise of commercial aviation required not only remarkable engineering, but also rigorous operational governance. The Internet reshaped communication and commerce, yet its continued growth demanded new approaches to cybersecurity, privacy, and digital trust. Artificial intelligence is following the same path. The first generation of AI innovation focused on making machines more capable. Researchers sought better algorithms, larger datasets, faster processors, and more sophisticated models. Progress was measured by accuracy, performance, and computational scale. Those advances continue today. Each new generation of AI appears more capable than the last. Systems can reason across multiple domains, generate software, analyze complex documents, create scientific hypotheses, and interact with people in increasingly natural ways. Capabilities that once seemed extraordinary are becoming routine. Yet as intelligence continues to improve, another realization is beginning to emerge. The future will not be limited by intelligence. It will be limited by governance. Organizations are already discovering that technical capability alone cannot answer the questions that matter most. Who is responsible when an AI system influences an important decision? Who authorizes autonomous actions? How should organizations demonstrate compliance to regulators? How can they prove that decisions remained consistent with corporate policy? How do they preserve trust as AI systems become increasingly independent? These are not engineering questions. They are governance questions. As artificial intelligence becomes embedded in critical infrastructure, healthcare, finance, government, manufacturing, defense, and every other high-risk industry, governance will become the defining capability that separates responsible organizations from merely innovative ones. The next decade is unlikely to be remembered simply as the era of larger language models. It may instead be remembered as the period when organizations learned that intelligence without governance cannot scale safely. This transformation is already influencing regulation around the world. Governments are moving beyond encouraging responsible AI and toward requiring it. Organizations are expected to demonstrate accountability, transparency, risk management, human oversight, and evidence that intelligent systems remain under appropriate control. These expectations will continue to expand. Not because regulators wish to slow innovation, but because society increasingly depends upon intelligent systems whose decisions affect people's lives. As expectations increase, organizations will face an important choice. Some will continue treating governance primarily as documentation created to satisfy compliance requirements. Others will recognize governance as operational infrastructure. The difference between these approaches will become increasingly significant. Organizations that rely exclusively on documentation may find themselves continually reacting to new regulations, new technologies, and new risks. Organizations that build constitutional governance into their operational architecture will discover that they can adapt far more efficiently because governance already exists as a living part of the system. This adaptability may become one of the greatest competitive advantages of the coming decade. Artificial intelligence itself will continue evolving in ways that are difficult to predict. Future systems may operate as collaborative agents, capable of managing complex workflows with minimal human intervention. They may negotiate with other intelligent systems, coordinate supply chains, assist scientific discovery, monitor critical infrastructure, or support public services at scales that are impossible today. Some systems may appear increasingly autonomous, but autonomy should never be confused with authority. No matter how sophisticated artificial intelligence becomes, organizations remain responsible for the decisions carried out in their name. Authority cannot emerge from computational capability. It must continue to originate from constitutional governance. This distinction becomes even more important as AI systems begin interacting directly with one another. In the future, an organization may depend upon networks of intelligent agents collaborating across departments, business partners, or even national borders. These systems may exchange information, coordinate actions, and make recommendations continuously. Without shared governance principles, such complexity could quickly become unmanageable. Constitutional governance provides the stability needed to coordinate increasingly intelligent ecosystems while preserving organizational accountability. Another significant change lies ahead. Today, organizations often evaluate AI systems individually. Tomorrow, they will evaluate governance architectures. Instead of asking which language model is most capable, leaders will increasingly ask whether their governance framework can accommodate whichever model proves most effective next year. Technology procurement will become easier when governance remains independent of specific vendors. Innovation will accelerate because organizations will no longer need to rebuild governance every time AI evolves. Governance becomes the stable platform upon which continuous technological change can safely occur. Perhaps the greatest shift, however, will not be technological at all. It will be cultural. Organizations will begin to understand that governance is not something imposed from outside by regulators or auditors. It is something that protects the organization from within. It safeguards purpose. It preserves accountability. It maintains institutional memory. It protects public trust. Most importantly, it allows organizations to innovate with confidence rather than hesitation. When governance becomes part of organizational identity, instead of merely a compliance obligation, artificial intelligence changes from a source of uncertainty into a source of sustainable capability. Looking further ahead, the conversation about artificial intelligence may become less focused on how intelligent machines can become and more focused on how responsibly organizations choose to use them. That would represent a profound shift. For decades, the pursuit of AI has centered on creating increasingly capable systems. The next era will focus on creating increasingly trustworthy systems. Trustworthiness will not emerge automatically from advances in machine learning. It will emerge from governance architectures that ensure intelligence always operates within clearly defined constitutional authority. In the end, the future of artificial intelligence will not be written solely by researchers, software engineers, or technology companies. It will also be shaped by boards of directors, executives, regulators, advisors, policymakers, and every organization that chooses to place governance at the center of its AI strategy. Because technology may determine what artificial intelligence can do, governance determines what it should do. And that distinction will define the next chapter in the evolution of intelligent systems. Chapter 14. From Recommendation to Constitutional Trust. Throughout this guide, we've explored governance as architecture rather than documentation. We've examined authority, execution, constitutional boundaries, runtime governance, and operational trust. Now let's bring these ideas together through a single story. Imagine a large regional healthcare organization. The organization serves millions of patients each year. It operates multiple hospitals, outpatient clinics, emergency departments, laboratories, and specialist centers. Like many healthcare providers, it has embraced artificial intelligence, not to replace physicians, but to help them make better decisions. Every day, thousands of AI-assisted recommendations are generated. Some identify patients at risk of deterioration. Others suggest diagnostic tests. Some recommend treatment pathways based on current clinical evidence. The organization's leadership believes AI can improve patient outcomes, but they also understand something equally important. No recommendation, regardless of how intelligent it appears, should become an operational action unless the organization itself has authorized it. That principle has shaped the way the healthcare system has been designed. One Monday morning, an emergency physician receives a patient complaining of severe chest pain. Within seconds, the hospital's clinical AI analyzes laboratory results, vital signs, ECG readings, medication history, imaging reports, and thousands of similar historical cases. The AI identifies a dangerous pattern. Its recommendation is immediate: administer an advanced anticoagulant therapy and transfer the patient directly to the cardiac intervention team. Statistically, the recommendation is highly persuasive. Historical outcomes suggest that rapid intervention significantly improves survival. In many organizations, this recommendation might immediately appear on the physician's screen, waiting for acceptance. Here, something different happens. Before anyone can act, the recommendation enters the governance architecture. The recommendation has not been rejected. It has not been approved. It has simply reached the constitutional checkpoint. The governance engine begins asking questions, not medical questions, governance questions. Is this treatment authorized under current hospital policy? Is the physician licensed to initiate this intervention? Has the patient's identity been positively verified? Is informed consent available, or does emergency treatment authority apply? Does the recommendation comply with the latest approved clinical protocol? Has that protocol been superseded by more recent medical guidance? Are there known contraindications recorded within the patient's history? Does this specific medication require pharmacy authorization before administration? Is the recommended dosage within approved safety limits? Has every prerequisite been satisfied? Notice something important. None of these questions ask whether the AI is intelligent. The organization has already accepted that the model is capable. Now the organization is asking a different question. Does it possess the constitutional authority to execute this recommendation? Within milliseconds, the governance system consults the organization's canonical knowledge, current clinical policies, drug approval rules, hospital protocols, professional licensing records, patient consent status, regulatory requirements. Every authoritative source is evaluated. One inconsistency immediately appears. 3 days earlier, the hospital's cardiology committee approved a revised treatment protocol. The AI model has not yet incorporated the update. Its recommendation follows last week's guidance, not this week's. From a statistical perspective, the recommendation remains reasonable. From a governance perspective, it is no longer authorized. The governance engine refuses execution. No medication order is generated. No automated workflow proceeds. No treatment begins. The physician receives a simple notification. Recommendation refused. Updated clinical protocol required. The AI has not failed. Governance has succeeded. Within moments, the physician reviews the revised protocol. The new guidance recommends a different medication based upon recently published clinical evidence. The physician follows the updated protocol. Treatment proceeds. The patient stabilizes. The outcome is successful. Most importantly, the organization remained within its constitutional authority throughout the entire decision. Now imagine a different scenario. Later that afternoon, another patient arrives. Again, the AI analyzes enormous volumes of information. Again, it proposes a treatment recommendation. This time, every constitutional requirement is satisfied. The physician possesses the required authority. Current clinical guidance supports the recommendation. Patient identity has been verified. Emergency consent provisions apply. Medication availability has been confirmed. Required specialists have been notified. No contraindications exist. Governance authorizes execution. Only now does the recommendation become an operational action. Medication orders are released. Clinical workflows begin. Care teams receive notifications. Everything proceeds exactly as intended. Notice the sequence. Artificial intelligence recommended. Governance determined. Execution followed. The organization never surrendered authority to probability. Authority remained where it had always belonged, with the organization itself. Now let's move forward several months. A national healthcare regulator receives an anonymous complaint. The allegation claims that the hospital administered an unauthorized treatment using artificial intelligence. An investigation begins. In many organizations, this becomes a familiar and exhausting process. Audit teams gather application logs. IT personnel recover archived databases. Emails are reviewed. Meeting minutes are examined. Medical records are compared. Staff members are interviewed. Engineers attempt to reconstruct software configurations from months earlier. Compliance officers try to determine which version of organizational policy existed at the time. Weeks pass, sometimes months. Even then, uncertainty often remains. But this organization operates differently. The auditor submits a single governance query. Show every authorization associated with patient ID 847291. Within moments, the complete constitutional history appears. The original AI recommendation, timestamp, confidence level, the governance evaluation, each policy consulted, every authority validation, the clinical protocol version, the physician's delegated authority, patient identity verification, consent status, risk evaluation, execution decision, digital signatures, immutable evidence, everything. The auditor can see precisely why the first recommendation was refused. The newer protocol became active 3 days before the patient's arrival. The AI had recommended an outdated treatment. Governance detected the discrepancy. Execution never occurred. The second recommendation is equally transparent. Every constitutional requirement was satisfied. Authority existed. Execution was approved. The auditor does not need interviews. There is no reconstruction. No speculation, no conflicting recollections. The evidence already exists because governance created it automatically during execution. The investigation that might once have required several weeks is completed before lunch. The regulator concludes that the hospital acted appropriately. The AI generated recommendations. The organization retained authority. Governance prevented unauthorized execution. Evidence demonstrated accountability. Public trust is preserved. This story illustrates something much larger than a successful technology deployment. It illustrates a different philosophy of artificial intelligence. Many organizations ask whether AI is becoming intelligent enough to make important decisions. Constitutional governance asks a different question. Can the organization prove that every important decision remained under legitimate authority? Those are fundamentally different objectives. Artificial intelligence will continue to improve. Models will become more accurate. Reasoning will become more sophisticated. Automation will become increasingly capable. None of those advances eliminate the need for governance. In fact, they make governance even more important. Because as intelligence grows, organizations must become even more confident that authority has not been surrendered to probability. This is why governance exists before execution. Why authority precedes intelligence. Why evidence is created automatically. Why constitutional architecture matters. In the end, the greatest achievement of this healthcare organization was not deploying an advanced AI system. Many organizations will do that. Its greatest achievement was something far more enduring. It designed a system in which intelligence could evolve without ever replacing organizational responsibility. The AI remained free to analyze, to recognize patterns, to recommend, to assist. But every operational decision remained exactly where it belonged, within the constitutional authority of the organization itself. That is the difference between intelligent systems and governable systems. And in high-risk industries, that difference is what transforms artificial intelligence from a source of uncertainty into a foundation for lasting trust. Chapter 15. A final reflection. Governance is the future. As we reach the end of this guide, it is worth taking a moment to reflect on how rapidly the world around us is changing. Only a few years ago, artificial intelligence was considered an emerging technology. It was discussed primarily by researchers, technology companies, and academic institutions. Most organizations viewed AI as something that might eventually become important. Today, that future has arrived. Artificial intelligence is no longer an experimental capability operating on the edge of business. It is becoming part of everyday decision-making. It assists doctors in diagnosing diseases. It helps financial institutions detect fraud. It supports engineers designing critical infrastructure. It enables governments to process information more efficiently and allows businesses to automate work that once required significant human effort. The pace of change is extraordinary. Every few months, new models appear with capabilities that surpass those that came before. Systems become faster, more capable, and increasingly autonomous. They reason across multiple domains, communicate naturally, and perform tasks that seemed impossible only a short time ago. It is easy to become captivated by these advances. Technology has always inspired optimism. Every breakthrough creates new opportunities, new industries, and new possibilities for improving how people live and work. Artificial intelligence is no exception. Yet history teaches us that technological progress alone has never guaranteed positive outcomes. Every transformative technology has eventually reached a point where society had to decide not only what was possible, but what was acceptable. That is where governance begins. Throughout this guide, one message has remained constant. Artificial intelligence is a remarkable tool, but it is still a tool. It does not possess organizational purpose. It does not carry legal responsibility. It does not define ethical principles. It does not establish public accountability. Those responsibilities belong to people and to the institutions they create. Organizations exist because society places trust in them. Customers trust businesses to protect their interests. Patients trust hospitals to safeguard their health. Citizens trust governments to exercise authority fairly and lawfully. Investors trust executives to make responsible decisions. Employees trust leaders to build organizations that operate with integrity. Artificial intelligence should strengthen that trust. It should never replace it. That is why governance matters. Governance ensures that intelligence remains aligned with organizational purpose. It ensures that authority is explicit rather than assumed. It ensures that every operational decision reflects constitutional principles instead of statistical probability alone. Most importantly, it ensures that responsibility always remains where it belongs with accountable human institutions. As you move forward from this guide, remember that governance is not a destination. It is a continuous discipline. Organizations evolve, markets change, regulations develop, technology advances. Governance must adapt alongside them while preserving the constitutional principles that define organizational identity. This is not a challenge that belongs only to technology departments. It belongs to boards of directors, to executive leadership, to governance professionals, to risk managers, to compliance officers, to advisors, to software architects, to policymakers, and ultimately to every person responsible for making decisions that affect other people. The future of artificial intelligence will not be determined solely by the quality of algorithms. It will be determined by the quality of the institutions that choose to deploy them. Organizations that understand this will approach AI differently. They will not ask only how intelligent their systems can become. They will ask how responsibly those systems can operate. They will not measure success solely by automation or efficiency. They will measure success by resilience, accountability, transparency, and trust. Those organizations will discover something important. Governance is not a cost of innovation. It is what makes innovation sustainable. Without governance, intelligence creates uncertainty. With governance, intelligence creates opportunity. Throughout these chapters, we have explored constitutional AI governance as an architectural approach rather than a compliance exercise. We have examined why authority must precede intelligence, why governance must exist at runtime, why explainability cannot replace authorization, and why trust emerges from constitutional architecture instead of technological optimism. These ideas are not intended to limit innovation. They are intended to protect it, because innovation that cannot be trusted will never achieve its full potential. As artificial intelligence continues to reshape industries across the world, every organization will face important decisions. Some will pursue capability first and attempt to govern later. Others will recognize that governance is not something that follows intelligence. It is the environment in which intelligence should operate. History will judge which approach proved wiser. My belief is simple. The organizations that lead the next generation of artificial intelligence will not necessarily be those with the largest models, the fastest infrastructure, or the greatest computational resources. They will be the organizations that understand a timeless principle. Technology creates possibilities. Governance determines which of those possibilities become reality. If this guide encourages you to ask better questions, design stronger governance, challenge existing assumptions, and place constitutional principles at the center of your organization's AI strategy, then it has achieved its purpose. Artificial intelligence will continue to evolve. That is inevitable. The question is whether governance will evolve with it. I believe it will. Not because regulations demand it, not because technology requires it, but because trust has always been the foundation upon which every successful organization is built. And in the age of artificial intelligence, trust will continue to be earned exactly as it always has, through responsible leadership, through accountable decisions, through constitutional governance. Thank you for taking this journey with me. The future of artificial intelligence is still being written. May your organization help write it with wisdom, responsibility, and the confidence that comes from governance designed not merely for today's technology, but for whatever tomorrow may bring.